Welcome to this module titled Assessing On-Farm Produce Safety Risks, Pre-Plant Stage. This module is part of a 7-part series to assist you in creating a food safety program and preparing you for a gap audit. These videos are based off of a series of 7 fact sheets available through Virginia Cooperative Extension. Today we will be discussing the third step of developing a food safety program, addressing the pre-plant stage of your operation. Before planting, it is important to assess the potential hazards on and around the farm and with materials used in production. Materials in the growing environment can be contaminated anytime before, during, and after production. Utilizing the farm sketch created in the first module, assess the potential risks, including the prior and current use of land and structures, adjacent areas around the farm, the source and condition of plant material, and potential concerns with the specific crop characteristics. The primary objective is to consider the previous uses of the farmland and determine if any subsequent practices may present a potential risk for contamination. It's really important to know how long the farm has been in production and what type of agricultural production has occurred. Previous agricultural practices could present risks for your current production. For example, in this scenario, the farm presented that the farmland was used to grow apples. In the 1950s, apples were widely grown in Virginia and North Carolina using lead arsenate as a primary insecticide for controlling codling moth. This could lead to lead and arsenic accumulation in the soil. If this were the case, you would want to get the soil tested to be sure that no heavy metals were present in the soil. Also, a factory was upstream from the farm, which dumped waste into the stream. It would be important to get the water tested for any lingering contaminants. While going through this process, create a written history of the farm. Not only is it important to go over the previous uses of the land, but also any current events that have occurred while you have been managing the land. Include things like extreme weather events such as flooding, when a septic system was put in, and if any leaks in the system have occurred, or if surrounding land has started being used for animal production like poultry or cattle farms. For example, in this scenario, 6 months ago, heavy rains caused flooding in the field. Flooding has been associated with an increased presence of human pathogens, harmful heavy metals, and other chemical contaminants in the soil. If flooding has occurred in growing areas, soil testing for heavy metals, human pathogens, and other possible contaminants should be considered. It is also important to look at the current use of the land. Using your sketch, you should assess the current use and condition of the farm. You should check your irrigation sources, manure storage piles, and the state of the septic system. Consider the physical placement of any manure storage piles in relation to the production areas. If compost is made on the farm or purchased from a buyer, make sure to consider prevention of any runoff and leaching into production fields or areas. Assess your water source for any potential sources of contamination. For surface water sources like ponds and streams, you will want to identify if any wild or agricultural animals use the water source. For wells, inspect the overall construction of the well, its siding, and the integrity of the well cap. The physical condition and structural integrity of all farm-related structures and equipment should be assessed. This includes all facilities from production facilities to storage structures to cooling facilities. Lastly, in the case of packing lines and other equipment, while it is possible to retrofit old used machinery, ensure that refabricated equipment meets acceptable food safety criteria. It is important to identify the activities on the land surrounding the farm and next to produce fields that may influence food safety. Using your sketch or map, specify what the surrounding land use is. Identify if produce fields are located near sewage treatment facilities, waste material landfills, or animal operations that may result in the potential risk for contamination due to leaching, runoff, wind drift, or other factors. In our example, this grower's fields are near a cattle operation. The farmer should consider what type of operation it is and if the animals are contained. So for example, a free-range grazing operation versus a concentrated feedlot or other facility. Is it a large-scale, concentrated, or small-scale animal operation? So how many animals are there in a given area? How far are the animal production and or grazing areas from the produce fields? Can animals accessing the surrounding area pose a risk of runoff contamination to your production water sources or into produce fields? Are the animals uphill from produce fields? Are there physical barriers such as berms, grass buffer strips, or ditches that may help to reduce the risk of field contamination? This farm is also next to a wooded area that has the potential for an increase of wildlife intrusion. The farmer should determine if wildlife intrusion is likely and whether any ways to deter animals from entering the field. We will cover this topic more in depth in a future module. In order to ensure safe handling of plant material and traceability, documentation should be kept on where plant materials are sourced and how they have been handled before and during shipping. Once received, it is important to store plant materials in a manner that avoids potential contamination. If trays, flats, plugs, or pots are used for transplanting, be sure that they are clean and not a potential source of contamination. Soil media and fertilizers used for transplants should be stored properly to avoid cross-contamination. An important consideration at the pre-plant stage also includes plant morphology and anatomy, or the external and internal characteristics of the crop plant. It can be especially important to identify the parts of the plant that will be harvested for food when evaluating risks. It's important to consider the following questions to determine if any extra care is needed for your crop. Is your product consumed raw or cooked? In the example, we have two commodities that are both grown in the ground. Potatoes are rarely consumed raw, so they will undergo a cooking step that could kill any pathogens that may be found on them. Carrots, on the other hand, are consumed raw, so special food safety measures may need to be considered. Is your product grown on the ground, staked, or in a tree? Commodities grown in the ground are more likely to come into contact with contaminated water or soil versus a staked or tree-grown product, while staked commodities like tomatoes are more likely to come into contact with contaminants, like through splashing during heavy rain, than a tree-grown commodity. Lastly, are there any qualities with the commodity that present a risk? This could include if internalization of human pathogens is possible, like with apples and tomatoes, or if the surface is harder to clean, or promote the attachment of microorganisms. So, for example, bacteria has shown the ability to attach to cantaloupe with a netted rind. Has the commodity being grown been involved in a foodborne outbreak, and what was the reason for the outbreak? Romaine lettuce grown in Arizona and California has been recently involved in several outbreaks of pathogenic E. coli that was linked to the irrigation water. These questions will help you realize the potential risks associated with your crop. You have completed the fourth module of this course to develop a food safety program on your farm. There are some important steps you should complete before moving on to the next module. You will want to make sure you review the pre-plant fact sheet found on the course site or on the Virginia Cooperative Extension website. There you will find more in-depth information on the topics we covered in this module, along with supporting resources and documents. At the end of the fact sheet, you will find a checklist that will help you implement the topics covered in this module. Completing it will help you prepare for the requirements of a gap audit. You will want to be sure that you properly document the farm's history. Once you have completed these steps, you should be ready to move on to the next module.